Hi, hello, and welcome to the show. I have got David Rothkopf joining me today. Great conversation with the Daily Beast writer, author, and host of Deep State Radio. We love David Rothkopf here, and you will today. That conversation begins at about 9.5 minutes in today. And as you know, I can't host any of these conversations, produce this daily program Monday through Saturday, sometimes more episodes without your support. Sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. You've got to be a paid subscriber to join us at our Thursday night hangouts tomorrow night. Should be fun and in Vegas. You don't have to be a paid subscriber for that. If you want to join us and buy tickets, we'd love to have anybody that wants to come to the big party in Vegas, March 22nd, 23rd. I've got your news every day here on Stand Up. First headlines, then clips. A little bonus clip today because I was on CNN on Monday night with Laura Coates and Kerry Champion talking about Taylor Swift and football. Is a fun 4-minute conversation. I'll share that as well. But first, to your headlines from Tuesday, the 30th of January into the 31st here on Wednesday. A lot of talk about immigration this week. Last week, I talked a lot about it with David Rothkopf in our conversation today. He's been writing about it. And yesterday, Republican-led House of Crazies, the House of Representatives panel on Homeland Security is set to advance articles of impeachment. They're trying to oust Joe Biden, President Biden's Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his handling of immigration at the southern U.S. border, even though, of course, he's hamstrung to do too much without congressional action. It's expected to beat down party line votes. The committee plans to charge Mayorkas with refusing to uphold law and breaching the public trust, specifically citing the Immigration and Nationality Act, which mandates that migrants not otherwise admissible shall be detained pending their removal. The full House could vote as early as next week. The New York Times says in their article about this that the emerging consensus among legal scholars that Republicans have produced no evidence that the secretary committed an impeachable offense and that the effort all is certain to collapse if it reaches the Senate. But making it there, Republicans could force an election year trial of President Biden's immigration policies, of course. So we'll see what's going to happen with that. But obviously record numbers of border crossings and an asylum system that's basically not working, functioning, broken. Immigration has become one of the biggest threats to President Biden's reelection, they say. And I think I fully agree with that. While he began his presidency pausing deportations and preaching compassion, President Biden last week implored Congress to grant him the power to shut down the border. So how far have we come? So many of these circumstances, of course, out of the president's control, and Congress has to take action, but they don't want to take action because they want to keep this problem a problem, as it has been since Reagan. I think we can go back to Phil Round in Wyoming emailed me this morning from Maine, I bet, actually, where he is now. And he said, correct me if I'm wrong, but Republicans have been nefariously keeping wedge issue alive for more than 20 years. Reagan was able to put off the release of Iran hostages until he was in office, depriving Carter of a win in the eyes of the public. So much bad in the party that began with Ronald Reagan. Thank you, Phil. Email me at standupwithpete@gmail.com. And now Hamas is the next headline. Hamas said it's considering a deal to pause the war. Hamas's political chief said today the group is considering a proposal floated by Israel, the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt to stop the fighting in Gaza for 6 weeks and exchange Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. The comments raise hopes in the region for the possibility of a longer truce. In the West Bank, meanwhile, Israeli forces killed a Hamas commander inside a hospital, and in Gaza, journalists are risking their lives to document death and destruction on a scale that's impossible for outsiders to grasp. This is, again, the New York Times. At least 76 Palestinian journalists have been killed since October 7th. Here's a headline. How about this one? Syphilis is soaring in the U.S. Case of syphilis, the sexually transmitted infection that is once nearly eliminated in the U.S., increased by 80% between 2018 and 2022. The rates soared in every age group, including newborns, bringing total new infections to their highest record since 1950. Syphilis has been on the rise in countries with national health care. Experts cited increased substance use, failing condom use, and dwindling sexual health services as potential factors. All right, here's some more headlines, rapid fire style. UPS plans to cut about 12,000 jobs this year in an effort to slash costs in the face of falling package volumes and higher wages. I know we have a couple listeners, including Steven out there in California, work for UPS. I hope your jobs are safe. Illinois state elections have ruled that Donald Trump will remain on the state ballot. The Illinois State Board of Elections allowing the disgraced former president to remain on the state's primary ballot, finding that the board lacks the authority to make a determination on his eligibility under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Ugh. News out. Let's see. Everybody's reporting this. Donald Trump's PAC spent roughly $50 million on legal expenses in 2023. So if you're donating to his campaign, wealthy or individual donor, you're probably donating to his legal costs. Shh. The Justice Department investigating the use of illegal campaign funds by Congresswoman Cori Bush. That story broke today. In Pakistan, the former Prime Minister Imran Khan was sentenced to 10 years in prison, what's widely seen as a campaign by the military to sideline one of their leading critics. At the White House yesterday, President Joe Biden said that he has made a decision how to respond to the drone attack that killed 3 U.S. soldiers and injured dozens of others at a base in northeast Jordan. As he departed the White House on Tuesday morning, President Biden was asked by a reporter if he'd made a decision in response to the attack by Iran-backed militants on Sunday, and President Biden simply said yes. A member of the pro-Nazi group White Lives Matter was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for firebombing an Ohio church that had been planning to host 2 drag events. The 20-year-old far-right extremist from Ohio was arrested last year after he made Molotov cocktails and threw them at the community church of Chesterland in Chesterland, Ohio. And speaking of criminal sentencing, a Donald Trump supporter who blindside tackled a U.S. Capitol police officer from behind on January 6th and flipped him over a ledge was sentenced to more than 6 years in prison. He's a New York man who thought Trump was the greatest president in American history. Now he's been sentenced to 78 months in federal prison. Good tackle, though. Former President Donald Trump's attorney, Alina Habba, backed off yesterday of a conflict of interest claim against the judge who presided over the E. Jean Carroll defamation trial after Carroll's lawyer threatened to pursue sanctions, and she was really embarrassed. It's a pretty interesting story. And a terrible story out of Maine. Our schools are under attack by these right-wing, white supremacist, anti-LGBT people. The diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator of a public schools in southern Portland, Maine, has resigned and left the state, saying he fears for his family's safety after receiving a threatening letter from a white supremacist. The attack on Mohammed al-Badhadli, who came to the U.S. a decade ago from Iraq after it became too dangerous, comes at a time when many Republicans are opposed to DEI initiatives that include recruiting and retaining faculty and students of color, and a lot more than just people of color. And in San Diego, apparently a potential crisis or massacre was averted when a high school student and his doomsday prepping dad were arrested after police say the teenager threatened to shoot up Rancho Bernardo High School. Police received several reports Friday saying the suspected teen was showing concerning videos and making threatening statements against the school. For Tuesday, January 30th, the police department said the same day the student was not named because he was underage, but he was arrested and taken to juvenile hall. So maybe a horrible crisis averted out there to San Diego school. And finally, headline, a monkey named King Gussie Kong is on the run in the Scottish Highlands after escaping from a wildlife park enclosure. And I just want to say, with a whole bunch of other people, I'm sure they're saying it, run, King Gussie, run! You know that gorilla is hopefully running through Scotland yelling, freedom! All right, enough jokes, at least enough bad ones. And normally at this point in the show, the newscast, I would start sharing audio clips. That takes a couple of hours to get done, and that I did not have yesterday and last night. Couple things coming up, all good stuff, but there's just no way to get it done. I'm sorry, I will tell you a lot of things did get said in different places yesterday that were crazy or important or enlightening, and I love to play these clips, but it's a lot of work, and I didn't have the time for it tonight. I will tomorrow and the next day. So thank you very much for your understanding. Don't be mad. You're not going to be, because my conversation with David Rothkopf is as good today as it always is. He's so good, so smart. We covered a lot of ground. He's written several articles, one of which you'll see I didn't know he had written, and I wasn't as prepared for it, but we got it done. And you can read him at the Daily Beast. You can listen to him at Deep State Radio and follow him on all the social media, especially Twitter, where he still shares so much of his own really great original thought, so many other people's as well. My daily go-to, David Rothkopf, joins me now. Oh, I really have a hard time going a week without talking to you. But luckily, you write articles, the Daily Beast, which I'm going to talk with you about. And, of course, you host your podcast, which is only getting bigger and bigger at Deep State Network. And I still love you on Twitter. I love you on Twitter. And thank you for the nice mention. That was nice.
Oh, well, of course. But you didn't mention my article at the New Republic this weekend.
Geez, I didn't even read it because so now I feel completely unprepared to interview you.
Well, I guess, that's always a first time.
I did actually. Now I'm reminded of it. I thought there was an article that a lot of people were talking about of yours, but I thought it was this Daily Beast one. And now I'm going over to the New Republic, which is Trump is a combination of every threat we've ever faced in history. You wrote this with Bernard Schwartz. If we wake up to awful news on November 6th, we'll be asking ourselves one question. Did we do enough? A combination of all the threats. It makes him sound like Thanos or some cartoon villain.
He is like a cartoon villain. I mean, let's be honest. But if you were going to have a cartoon villain, it'd be kind of a big fat cat, who looked all, distended and sort of maniacal and was a little crazy and
weird color
and so forth. And that you'd end up just like him. But what I mean in the sense of that article is Trump thinks he's above the law. He thinks that he's a king. We got rid of a king. Trump doesn't respect the Constitution. He's recently said that the southern states that don't agree with the federal government should do whatever they want, effectively secede from the government. We faced that problem 160 years ago. Trump is a fascist who supports fascists. We fought them in World War II. Trump loves the Kremlin, Russia. We fought that problem throughout the Cold War. Trump is a fat cat who's taking advantage of everybody else in society. We fought during the period of the trust busters, fat cats just like that, robber barons like Trump. I can go on. The reality is, pick a period in history, pick what our problem was, racism, misogyny, pick any problem you want. Trump represents that problem. He is like the American Thanos.
Yeah, I mean, and his finger snap would be the election. I mean,
that would be it for democracy.
In America, I can't see it really any other way. What do you make of some of these U.S. senators who have been on TV and on the record already saying they support the state of Texas over the Supreme Court and they support Donald Trump even after the latest settlement with E. Jean Carroll? I mean, I'm thinking of Senator Langford on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan and several other senators, John Cornyn and others, have all fallen in line, to mention someone like Tim Scott. He also affirmed to a journalist's question after being asked about the E. Jean Carroll settlement, do you still support him? Yes, they still support him regardless of his stance on the Constitution, the border, the war. And what do you think of that, these senators?
Well, you just look, there was a time when politicians at least made a pretense of standing for something. The Republican Party at least had a pretense. It was for U.S. national security. It was for law and order. It was for family values. It was for our strong American institutions. Well, Trump has taken a position that is against all those things. He led a coup. He sold out the country to our enemies, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody listening knows these things. And all of the leaders of the Republican Party have said, nope, we have no values anymore. We have no program anymore. We have a person. We are a cult of personality. We support one guy. And frankly, I find it astonishing. It was one of the reasons I wrote the New Republic article. I find it astonishing just how disciplined the Republicans have been with each and every bad revelation or bad outcome for Trump. Judge says, yeah, he's a rapist. I'm behind him. $83 million. We love this guy, and it's going to happen this week. A judge is going to say he was a fraud and kind of come up with some big thing. We love him. Then some other court is going to say he doesn't have the presidential immunity he seeks. That'll happen any day now, too. And they'll say, oh, see, this is just rigged against him. And I saw somebody online, some pillar of morality. I would think it was Chris Cuomo, saying that's why the two-party system is poisonous.
Oh,
and it's like, no, it's not. The two-party system is going to be our salvation because at least one of the parties stands for something. For most of our history, the two-party system has worked pretty well. The problem is not that system. It's one party, the Republican Party, just tossed out its values, lined up behind the worst possible candidate ever, and said, if, this floats my boat, so I don't really care about anybody else.
Absolutely right. I mean, then there's example after example of it, two of which you've written about recently also at the Daily Beast, talking about your new Republic article, which I didn't read, but looks really good. And we just kind of talked about it.
That's fine. I'd rather have compliments than people reading the article.
I think I might have shared it and still not read it. I don't think that makes it any better. I think that makes me worse than these Republicans we're talking about.
That's what everybody does on Twitter.
Oh. I feel like
my friend posted, so I'm going to retweet it.
I feel like you don't do that. I feel like, because I've asked you about things that you've shared, and you usually almost always on.
I try to be.
All right. Well, listen, over at the Beast, you've got two articles that are pretty well connected while dealing with different parts of the world, still dealing with the Republican Party and its leadership, that are holding hostage really important negotiations, whether it be on our border or with Israel and Gaza, the Palestinians, or with Ukrainians aid. It's time for President Biden to take control of the Texas border is the title of one piece. And the Gaza ceasefire deal is the only way to avoid a wider war. And yet it's the Republican Party standing in the way of either of those negotiations really happening with much success. But let's start first on the Texas border, where the Supreme Court decided somehow 4 justices voted against the Constitution, I guess, but that the federal government had control of our border. And it looks like Texas is trying to defy it. How big of a deal? You kind of tried to say it. How big of a deal is this? You compared it to.
It's a big deal. First of all, the language they used in asserting their right to protect the border, which has to do with the idea that there is an invasion and they have to protect themselves, that the federal government won't, is very, very close to the language that the southern states used when they seceded from the Union in 1861. But without even taking it to the extreme of civil war, what you've got here is a precedent that could be extremely damaging. Imagine if the federal government said, you must do X or you must do Y with regard to education or having a clean environment or allowing people to marry the person they want. And then they say, the Constitution is now a Chinese menu. I can take one from column. I can choose what I want.
Yeah.
It's just a suggestion. And we're not going to do those things. So we're not going to be, we're going to go back to sort of the Articles of Confederation. We're going to be a loosely linked group of states, all of which have, different beliefs, agendas, values. And the federal government will be, eviscerated. Now, of course, imagine for a moment that Gavin Newsom said, the Supreme Court's wrong on the Second Amendment. We're going to ban guns in California because we have to protect ourselves. The Constitution gives us the right. If Texas has the right to protect itself, then California has the right to protect itself. How batshit would they go if Democrats started selectively? Now, we'll never do that because we don't play hardball, but it's just such an insanely dangerous precedent that I think Biden should do what he's been doing, try to negotiate a border deal, because that is the thing that sort of takes this issue out of their hands. And then B, if that doesn't happen and they're not cooperating, federalize the Texas National Guard and send in, the 101st Airborne Division. That's what Dwight Eisenhower did when Governor Orville Faubus in 1956 said, I'm not going to honor Brown versus Board of Education. And they, instantly Eisenhower said, nope, that's not the way we play the game here in this country. And he imposed federal will on the state of Arkansas in that case. That's ultimately, if push comes to shove, what is going to have to be done. Now, there can be intermediate steps. somebody could, bring this back to Supreme Court and hold them in contempt and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, but I think sooner or later, the stake has to be put through the heart of this terrible idea.
Well, there have been some incremental steps, right? Like the first thing they did was sue the Biden administration. I talked to Elie Mystal on yesterday's show. He's got a new piece at The Nation. Texas is spoiling for a civil war. He's critical of the Biden administration for dragging their feet. He thinks they need to do what you just suggested they do right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, my instinct is, yeah, let's do that. But,
the image.
If the Biden administration can get a deal on the border, that could be an important step. And if the Biden administration sends in federal troops right now, the whole GOP will end up in an uproar, and that deal's not going to get done. So I think we can wait a week or two and see what happens.
What it looks like is Texas has illegally put barriers and barbed wire and so on along the border. And
people have died, right? I mean, let's not forget that a woman and her 2 children died because Texas had done that, and they kept the federal government from going in and rescuing them.
Well, a lot of Americans, it's disgusting. A lot of Americans don't care about that and are okay with that. And now you're going to have the image of the federal government taking security or barriers down. And the talking point Republicans will use, look at the Biden administration, federal government is making us literally taking down all of these security measures. And what they want to do, of course, is pass legislation that has security measures that are legal and that are effective and that are work and that are more humane. But that's how that's going to play out politically. It almost seems like that's the strategy for Republicans.
Well, it is the strategy. But that's why I'm saying, see if you can get this deal.
Well, is it alive still? My understanding is that Trump demanded they kill it, and Mitch McConnell dangerously is going along with it in the Senate.
Yeah, well, Mitch maybe was, maybe wasn't. Trump demanded that. Mike Johnson has said it would die. But Lankford and a bunch of the Republicans are still trying to work on it. The Democrats are still trying to work on it. And we'll see what happens when there's an actual deal, if there is. And we'll see whether the House can actually pass it up. Because, the argument of Lankford, for example, who's certainly nobody's idea of even a moderate, he's a very conservative guy, is this is the toughest immigration bill in 40 years. And so let's see whether it is or not. And let's see how that plays out.
Let's go to Ukraine and then Gaza. It's all kind of connected, I guess, at least going through congressional negotiation for approval for funding. First, how would you describe the situation right now in Ukraine?
The situation in Ukraine is desperate, and it is directly connected to this. Why? Because the Republicans connected it to this. Mike Johnson said, we're not moving on Ukraine aid until we have the border deal done. That's when he wanted a border deal. Of course, recently he said, I don't actually want a border deal until we have Trump in it. Well, if you don't want it, then how do you get the Ukraine thing freed up? Well, while he is dithering and making Vladimir Putin very happy and making Donald Trump very happy, the Ukrainian army is running out of ammunition. It's being weakened vis-a-vis the Russians. Today, the director of Central Intelligence, Bill Burns, said this would be a mistake of historic proportions. Because if we pull out our aid, European aid alone is not enough. Ukraine will start to lose. Russia will gain. The message will be the West is not, a strong alliance anymore. Russia will feel it has a free pass to consider other areas of expansion in the region. And if that happens, because of the NATO treaty, at least if there is a U.S. that honors the NATO treaty, and I can't say that Donald Trump would actually do that, but if there is somebody who honors the NATO treaty, then U.S. troops could be involved in a war with Russia because of this absurd, dangerous, reckless action by the Republicans to block the aid.
It's dire, it would seem. I mean, I read an article yesterday that European nations are trying to come together and figure out what to do without U.S. aid.
Yeah, and they should. The president of Estonia, for one, and there have been many, have been saying, let's seize Russian assets. There are about $360 billion in Russian assets that we hold and give them to the Ukrainians. Let's do that. What are we waiting for?
Right.
And if you don't want to do it all at once, give the Ukrainians the interest that is being paid on those assets. And we can get to the assets later. That could help a lot. But I also think, there are other things we can do. And those include taking restrictions off of how you use U.S. weapons, telling foreign governments that they can supply U.S.-made weapons to Ukraine and will replace them in the future. Because we if you buy F-15s, you can't just resell those anywhere. We have a veto power over where they go. Well, we could do all of that stuff. Ukraine needs to be able to strike Russia where these attacks come from, even if they're in Russia, use all the tools at their disposal. And I think, if this thing doesn't come through, we're going to have to start being more creative about how we support them.
That's for sure. And now let's move to the Middle East. And you've got this piece. I've mentioned it. It's obviously it's been dire there. I don't know how else to phrase it. A Gaza ceasefire deal is the only way to avoid a wider war. But you just saw 3 Americans killed in this outpost by a drone attack by an Iranian-supported group. And obviously, we're watching a scene you've written about and covered what's going on in the Red Sea with the Houthis, also supported by Iran. But you can't kill 3 Americans, apparently, without some kind of retaliation from the United States government. President Biden today was asked, has he decided, how he's going to retaliate or act or respond? And he just, briefly said yes, which I guess is a good answer because you don't tell people exactly what you're going to do. But this is all connected back to, obviously, what's happening in Gaza, right? I mean, this is a much bigger thing, but that doesn't deter Republicans from.
The important thing is your last point, which is it's part of a much bigger thing. So don't do anything that undermines your bigger objectives.
So don't invade and bomb Tehran.
Oh, but don't start a bigger, broader war if that doesn't advance your objectives. The point is, don't let retaliation or tactical considerations distract you from your long-term strategic goals. Stay strategic. And so, should the U.S. respond? Will the U.S. respond? Yes. The president said could start as soon as today or tomorrow. And it's going to go on for a while. And as Secretary Blinken has said, it can ramp up. It can have multiple phases. That's fine. There are a lot of choices of targets. You can strike Iranian-backed militia groups in Syria or Iraq. You can strike Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces who are stationed outside of Iran. You could conceivably attack Iranian vessels on the high seas, including the spy ship that's been aiding the Houthis in targeting Western ships as it passes through the region. But probably not as far as Iran itself goes, at least at this phase of the thing, because you don't want to start a wider war.
Right.
Can you attack Iran with cyber? Yeah. Will we attack Iran with cyber? Absolutely. Will the Israelis and others be doing covert stuff in Iran for the foreseeable future? Yes, they will. But if you want to make people safer in the region, if you want to make U.S. soldiers safer, if you want to make vessels transiting the Red Sea safer, there is one thing that you can do, and that's get a ceasefire and get the fighting in Gaza to stop. And there's a negotiation ongoing, and it's not at the moment going super well. Hamas has said they don't want to do certain things. Bibi Netanyahu, who is just as big a problem in these negotiations, has said he doesn't want to do certain things. But we can't do something that would, in an instant, undermine those negotiations, because that's the near-term big prize. So it's just a balancing act, and I think we need to, be prudent, because I've been listening to a lot of, TV shows and reading a lot of articles in which, they're Americans, Lindsey, John Cornyn, these kind of folks who are like, bomb Tehran, go after them. This is the war we need. The reason they're doing this is that we haven't been willing to make Iran pay. And it's like, this region has been involved in fighting for the past 70 or 80 years. There have been conflict. Every single leader in this region is used to living with the fighting. That's the status quo. That's why a lot of things we might think of as deterrents don't deter them. And so we need to be a little smarter and more strategic.
The only thing the people in that part of the world respond to is strength. of the American military. That's the only thing that works.
Is that true? I see. You're being hilarious. Yeah, sorry. I didn't appreciate the hilarity there for a second, but of course it's not true. The biggest single change that's happened in the region is the fact that a lot of countries that were bent on destroying Israel in 1948, over the course of the past 40 years, and particularly over the course of the past 5 years, have decided they don't want to do that. They'd like to be prosperous. They don't want to go to war with a nuclear power. They'd like to trade with a country that's the biggest tech leader in the region. And so the fact that, the Abraham Accords took place, the Egypt deal took place many, many years before that the Saudis are talking about a deal, that's the best argument there is that force is the only answer.
Yeah, well, we had a deal at one point, and listener Paul W. emailed me today and said, I was reading about what's going on in Iran, and from the side involved in all or most of the chaos in the Middle East, I got wondering, what would it be like had Trump not taken us out of the JCPOA or the Iran nuclear agreement? And then asked me that I ask a question to one of my guests. And so I'm asking that to the guy that I want most to answer it later on. No, you, David Rothkopf. What do you think about that, the Iran deal? And
of course, it was a terrible mistake. The JCPOA was working, and Iran stopped, progressing on getting a nuclear weapon. When we withdrew from the JCPOA, they turned back on the program, and they are now much, much closer than they were to having enough enriched uranium, of being able to enrich uranium even more, to have the quantities necessary to produce one or more weapons and become a nuclear power. They're nearly nuclear, as people call it, and that's super dangerous because the one kind of sort of deterrence that we know works is nuclear deterrence. Nobody wants to mess with nuclear states because they have the ability to unleash a different level of destruction. And to have a neighborhood troublemaker like Iran develop that capability would be hugely destabilizing. Every other country on Iran's borders, the Saudis, the others, they'd all go, oh, well, we need to have nukes now to offset their nukes. And all of a sudden, this part of the world where everybody fights all the time will become dramatically more dangerous.
Last question, and I got to go. E. Jean Carroll, you know her. What's your reaction to the settlement, Trump's behavior? What is, if anything, does this mean? How significant of a deal is it?
I think one of the most significant things about the deal, she's been doing TV and stuff, and one of the things that she's been saying is, he's just a guy. I was intimidated. Then I looked at him in the courtroom. Yeah. The emperor has no clothes. Right. I'm not afraid of him. Part of Trump's appeal is that he's larger than life, that he's richer than Croesus, that nobody can touch him, that he's the Teflon Don, and that you better not mess with him or the wrath of Trump's army is going to come down on you. And the reality is that's not true. He's a big loser. He's never won an election popular vote. He's gone bankrupt a lot. He may be on the verge of going bankrupt again if people come after him for all of this stuff. He is touchable in the sense that, you can get to him and you can take him down a notch or two if he breaks the law. And gradually this week even, we're going to see more examples of that. And she deserves a huge amount of credit. This is an 80-year-old woman who stood up and said, I'm not going to be spoken about that way. And I can demonstrate to the satisfaction of a jury that he did something that he said he didn't do. And she did that. And then when he continued to defame her, she said, okay, 5 million, not enough for you. Let's go back at it.
Right. Unbelievable.
And, now it's 83 million. Actually, it's 88 million because it's 83 plus the 5 million. And, if he does it again, they will go at him again. And I think, actually, this will have an effect because here's one thing you haven't heard of since the $83 million verdict. You have not heard Trump say she was lying. You have not heard Trump do any of the stuff that he was doing before. And, there's a message in that, right?
Yeah. Well, give him some time.
Well, yeah, look, he can keep writing checks, or can he? That's going to be one of the questions that we're going to find out.
Do you think Joe Biden and Taylor Swift are working together to rig the Super Bowl? To make an announcement?
I know as a fact that because I'm the head of Deep State Radio, that Taylor Swift was created in a deep state laboratory, genetically engineered.
Oh, wow.
To gain 300 million followers on Twitter and to be a tool of the liberal establishment
from Tennessee
as we seek to take over all the God-fearing people in America and, put them to work in Chick-fil-A's.
Well, I want to invest in that lab.
No, it was very successful, and we're very proud of the achievement. We in the deep state.
David Rothkopf, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Same. Good to see you.
David Rothkopf, everybody. Thank you very much, my friend. Go read him at the Daily Beast and apparently the New Republic and listen to Deep State Radio. Go subscribe to that right now. Always, always love when he joins me, and I know so many of you do as well. So thank you for your support, for your paid subscription, for your rating and review on Spotify and iTunes. I hope to see you at tomorrow night's Hangout. I hope to see you in Las Vegas. I can't thank John Carroll enough for the music. He's going to be out there with us. And it's going to be an amazing, amazing weekend. And I'll be there Wednesday through Monday. So if you want to come out early or stay late or whatever, we're going to go on some hikes. You'll get all the information. Don't worry. Nobody will be left out in Las Vegas. There'll be a meetup. There'll be an itinerary. It's all coming. I promise you. Thank you very much, everybody. You bumblebees here at the end. I hope to see you guys out in Las Vegas too. That's it. That's all. Bye-bye. Take it away, Johnny.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See, all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.